Hello random viewer and welcome to the second video of stuff you should probably know as a private pilot. Today it is Runway Incursion Avoidance, but before that a brief disclaimer. Although I am a flight instructor, I am probably not your flight instructor. This video is intended to be a supplement to the lessons your instructor teaches you, but never a replacement for them. By watching this video, you are agreeing not to hold me accountable for any damages you may or may not receive by acting upon the information I'm about to provide. Remember that using this or any other video you find on the internet as a replacement for actual flight instruction is a terrible idea that I do not condone. With that out of the way, I present to you Runway Incursion Avoidance. And for this video, I am joined by a friend who hopefully makes the dynamic a little bit more interesting. That way it's not just me on my own talking to a camera like I am right now. So we'll cut to that here in just a moment. But first of all, what is a runway incursion? The FAA defines them as any I'm going to read it so I get it right. The FAA defines a runway incursion as any occurrence at an aerodrome involving the presence of an aircraft, vehicle, or person on the protected area of a surface designated for the takeoff and landing of aircraft. In plain English, anytime a person, vehicle, or object is on a runway when it should not be, that is a runway incursion. On a runway without clearance, or contrary to a clearance. So say you're told to turn off right, you turn off left. That's technically a runway incursion. The control tower exists almost exclusively to protect the runway. They are not responsible for collision avoidance in the pattern. That is the pilot's job. They will help, of course, but it's not their job to avoid collisions. But it is the runway that is protected, so you need to follow their instructions anytime you are in their airspace, but especially for the runway. What if, say, your brakes fail and you slam them on as best you can, but you only have one brake, so you barely slide across that line? Is that a runway incursion?
I would believe so.
Technically it is. What if you have a passenger out on the ramp and they just wander off?
I would say
walking.
Yes.
Yes, that's also a runway incursion. Someone's there who's not supposed to be. One of the airports where I used to work, we had one of the delivery drivers for one of the major companies, I can't remember which one, just decided to drive across the runway one day because it was easier than going around on the airport roads.
Yeah, I think and if you're not familiar with as far as the culture and environment, it's easy to make that. It's a dumb mistake, but it's easy to make that mistake.
You see pavement and it's,
right.
I mean, I'm here.
Look both ways before crossing.
If you're in doubt of whether the airplane will fit through a space, just get out and look. Shut down. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but it's a whole lot more embarrassing if you clip that wing on a hanger or a tree.
Easily avoidable.
Please don't be a ground accident statistic. It's actually one of the only accident rates that goes up as your experience goes up.
Oh, wow.
You as a student pilot are the least likely to actually be in a ground or taxi-related accident. And the more experience you gain, the higher your chance of that happening. These parking spots, these sometimes confuse people. Park with the wings aligned with the straight part, and then the straight part of the plane with the other. Some of the challenges with runway incursion avoidance is, well, there are other people too. So that can make it very difficult when someone else is in your way, rolling through, or not doing what they're supposed to. Normally we're supposed to get off a runway as soon as possible after landing, but sometimes you can't because there's another airplane there.
Right.
So now you have to ask the control tower and all that. We'll be talking primarily about control towered airports, but we will spend some time on non-towered because that also, you can have a runway incursion there as well. So some of the fun is having all these signs to comply with, so I'll go ahead and pull up a list of signs. 3 main kinds of signs. There's mandatory signs, direction signs, and position signs, but I like to make it simpler. Things you really need to pay attention to, where you are, and where you're going. So yellow signs with yellow background, black markings, that means that this thing is up ahead or this thing is past the sign or something like that. So if you see a J with a arrow like that, what do you think that would mean?
I'm not sure. Junction, maybe?
So that would be, say, if this were Taxiway Juliet here.
Okay, yeah.
You might see this sign like this. if you were coming off of the runway.
Correct,
so,
correct.
And the sign would be before or after the taxiway that is Taxiway Juliet.
Okay. It would be before.
Before, exactly. So you see the sign Juliet, past the sign, and then it's the immediate next right.
Okay.
They wouldn't put the sign afterwards because that would be really confusing when there's multiple lined up.
Correct.
But I've seen that trip people up. So when you see the sign, it's the next turn. The sign is at the intersection.
Right.
And it's like that on streets, I think, as well. And it would be a right turn to get onto Taxiway Juliet. Taxiway Lima would be a slight left. We'll do more with this later, but it'd be kind of like a back around and left turn to get to Taxiway Lima, according to that sign. Don't keep taxiing in that direction, is what that means. These markings here are telling you that these markings are up ahead, so you might see these signs just before or right at the marking. And that will help you identify it, especially at night when maybe you don't have a good landing light. It's hard to see the ground. Well, you'll see that lit up sign right before you're coming up to the hold short lines. So we'll talk about those hold short lines. Let's start with this one here. So you taxi up, and we'll keep saying this is Taxiway Juliet. What do you have to hear in order to cross that line?
You need to initiate the actual action with the ground and get permission. You would need to hear cleared to taxi via Juliet to runway, whatever runway you plan on taking.
Correct. They don't typically use the word cleared except for taking off or landing or something similar. But they would say taxi via Juliet, runway 27. If this were runway 27, I haven't labeled it, but I think that'll make sense from the video because left is often. We'll say north is up, so 27 makes sense. So once you're told taxi runway 27 via Juliet, you would read back those instructions, taxi 27 via Juliet, and now you're cleared to taxi up and along.
At that point, right, you would have permission to enter that taxiway.
Okay. You come up to this marking. It looks like this here. I didn't do the best job drawing it. Can we cross this thing?
No.
It depends. Most airports have an ATIS. Stands for Automatic Terminal Information System.
Okay.
It's not really automatic. It's someone read it and then it's played.
On a loop.
On a loop. But okay. At Donaldson, we don't have one during the day. When the tower's closed, there is an automated AWOS, Automatic Weather Observation System. Though at most controlled tower airports, we do have an ATIS. And at the very end, they're going to talk about which runways are in use, and then listen if they say visual approach is in use or ILS approach is in use. If you hear that term, ILS approach is in use, you may not cross that line.
Okay.
Because this is an ILS critical area. The way an ILS works is there's an antenna way down here at the other end of the runway. It sends a beam like this. So if you have another airplane coming in to land and you were to taxi into this area, your tail fin could block the signal going to them if they were over here and give really strange readings on their instruments.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting.
So that's what the ILS critical area is for. But if you do not hear ILS approaches in use, they're not using the ILS.
Right. That's interesting. I don't know that I've seen that before.
Yeah, they're pretty rare. I don't see them very often, but Concorde does because it has a really long, skinny runway. And remember that this antenna is right here. There's the actual localizer antenna. If you've seen this truss structure at the end of a runway,
definitely.
That's the localizer. And you can see why they might want to put a restriction on that, because that beam is coming this way for the people landing this way.
I gotcha.
So way out here, that beam starts to cross the runway. So an airplane anywhere along here could be a problem if an airliner or someone IFR is trying to land this way. If it's a cloudy day and you know it's pretty low conditions and think someone could be using the ILS, it doesn't hurt to ask the tower.
Okay.
Even if you did not hear ILS approaches in use.
Is it typically only one ILS? The ILS is only on one runway itself?
It depends. So at Charlotte Douglas, if we go over to there, they have them in both directions.
Okay.
There's a localizer antenna there. See all those little things? So that's for this runway, landing south. But they also have one on the north end for landing north. So they have different frequencies and they cross each other.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool.
That is very cool. I mean, depending on your weather and whether or not you would need that.
It does depend, but it is nice having an ILS on both runways. Although a lot of these smaller airports that we're flying in and out of, no, they just have one. Greenville downtown only has one. So if the weather is really clear and you do not hear ILS approaches in use, you're fine. You can go right over that ILS critical area. Otherwise, ask. Okay.
So you're going to hear that on the ATIS, correct?
Yes, on the ATIS when you get the weather. You would hear ILS or visual approaches in use, or maybe RNAV approaches in use.
Okay.
If they say RNAV approaches in use, I'd still ask, because that's still instrument things going on.
Okay.
Because even if they're defaulting, that's telling the airplanes that are arriving what to expect. Expect an RNAV approach, but they could still ask for an ILS.
Okay.
And then you being in the ILS critical area could be a problem. So I would just ask if it's instrument conditions or instrument approaches of any sort are happening. We come up to this line. Can we cross that?
No.
No. What do we have to hear to cross that?
Cleared. Cleared for runway.
Very good. The only exception to that would be to cross the runway. If they say cross 27, you are good to go ahead and go across. But if you were going to be on this runway, you need to hear cleared for takeoff or cleared to land or cross. They all start with C. So if you don't hear cross or cleared, do not touch a runway. Now, one thing I forgot to talk about when I had my friend here was a line up and wait clearance. That would be where an aircraft is holding at this position. They call for their takeoff clearance, or maybe the tower clears them. But instead of hearing a Cherokee 12345 cleared takeoff runway 9er, they hear Cherokee 12345 a line up and wait runway 9er. This is an interesting clearance that I'm not a huge fan of. I understand how it helps with traffic flow, but be on very high alert, be very careful. What you are expected to do is taxi onto the runway, line up, and then stop. You are not allowed to take off until you receive your cleared for takeoff runway 9er. Until you hear cleared for takeoff runway 9er, you are to stop on that runway and not move. Now, it has happened, it's rare, but it has happened to where an air traffic controller forgets about the aircraft that has been told to line up and wait, and then clears another airplane to land behind them. When you have been given a line up and wait clearance, look both ways, especially on final. Make sure there are no other airplanes coming in to land. Also pay attention to how long you've been waiting. If you've been sitting there for more than a minute, maybe 2 minutes, it's time to ask the tower what's going on, or just confirming you want Cherokee 12345 to continue holding on runway 9er. And this is especially true if you hear someone cleared to land or know that there is someone behind you coming in to land. You might want to get off that runway in a hurry. So just something to be aware of. Have the situational awareness to know that you don't want to be sitting on this runway for too long. And if you've been cleared to line up and wait, just expect a takeoff clearance very soon. If you don't receive it, ask, because that could turn ugly quickly if you don't. And also notice the color changes. We have yellow markings for taxiways and white markings for a runway. So if you're seeing white markings, you're on a runway. So be aware of that. I mean, you can even see it on these here. See, it's all yellow.
Yep. Wow, it's not something. It's crazy. Something you look at all the time,
but you don't think about it.
No.
But it's all there, which is really nice. Now, technically, the runway starts anytime across this whole short line. So this little bit of the taxiway is still considered part of the runway. You need that cleared for takeoff or cleared to land or cross the runway to be able to enter this part. When you cross a single, you know you're getting onto a taxiway.
Okay, yeah.
When you cross a double, be double alert because you're getting onto a runway.
Got it.
Those are the 3 levels of security at an airport, at least as far as clearances are concerned. Ramps are pretty much uncontrolled in the U.S. So you can taxi around, run your engine, whatever you want on a ramp. You're pretty much fine. Just, I mean, obviously not illegal things, but you get what I'm saying. Apparently, in some other countries, it is not that way. I had a pilot come and fly with me who did her ratings in one of the Caribbean islands. I don't know which one. But you had to have clearance to start your engine. You had to turn on the avionics and battery, call the tower, ask for permission to start your engine on the ramp before you could do it.
Oh, wow. That kind of takes the fun out of it.
It does a little bit. But in the U.S., no, that is not the case. You can go ahead and start your engine whenever you like, pretty much. Just make sure there's no one in the way of the propeller or behind you. Things like that, but that's for another. As far as clearances are concerned, you're good on a ramp. It's uncontrolled, pretty much. Now, as soon as you cross this line, you are now on a taxiway. In a taxiway, you do have to have permission to be there. And just tell the tower what you're doing. If you just want to taxi around for practice, you can tell them that. Hey, I'd like some taxi practice. I just want to taxi up this taxiway and then back down. They can say no, but a taxiway it's lower stress than a runway. So we're cleared for takeoff. Now we're allowed to taxi onto this. And we take off. Okay. When we are cleared to land, we're allowed to land, and let's say we land this way. Do I need clearance to cross the dotted side of a hold short line?
No.
No, you do not. You need to get off that runway as quickly as possible after you land because it's a secured area. You were cleared to land, and now that you have landed, get off the runway. Your clearance, you're at the limit of your clearance, so to speak. And make sure the entire plane is across that line. A lot of people will stop with their tail still sticking over. Well, I'm across the line. Yes, in the cockpit you might be across the line, but if any part of the plane is still over that line, that's a problem. So you need to get across the rest of the way. One of the best things you can do is tell them before you land where you're going.
Okay.
Please don't be the guy who lands at an airport. I'm going to... I don't know where I'm going. Where can I get fuel here? I've heard it happen too many times. Please don't be that guy. Get off the runway. Know if you're going to turn right or left at the very least. Know if you're making a right or left turn. Fuel at the Greenville Downtown Airport is almost exclusively on the west side.
Okay.
So if you're landing 19, you should be making a right turn at the very least. The other thing you can do in ForeFlight, go to FBOs. Those are your fixed-based operators. That could be people where you get fuel, maintenance. There's a lot of options here. So Above and Beyond, that's a maintenance place. PF Flyers, they do avionics. Oh, it's there. Special Services, they do maintenance. Touch and Go does maintenance. That's a flight school. There's a flight school. But know which one you're going to, and there are your options. Now, a lot of people know that there's a restaurant at the downtown airport.
I heard about that.
But you don't see it listed here. So that's where you're going to need to pull out your Apple or Google Maps and Google, where is the restaurant? Know what part of the airport it's on.
Right.
And then
it's a good start.
Plan your taxi route accordingly. The restaurant at the Greenville Downtown Airport is right here. So looking at it with north up, that's in the bottom left corner. Okay, let's go over to the airport diagram and see if we can find it. Bottom left corner. It's probably going to be on the south ramp. I can at least
narrow it down.
Figure that much out. It is that building right there.
Right.
It's not... It should be marked for how many people fly into downtown to go to the restaurants. Have a basic idea of where it is so that you can get off the runway on the right, on the correct side. If you're landing 19, it is the right side, but if you're landing 1, it is the left side.
Okay.
Don't turn off right landing runway 1 and be over here at the southeast ramp. I need to get to the restaurant.
Oh, no.
You have to be taxied around, across the runway. It's just waiting for the long line of airplanes to land who are also going to the restaurant, lining up behind you, also turning off the runway. Just,
oh, man.
Don't be that guy. Now, I see something else interesting on here. There's this HS1, and they're circling this. HS stands for hotspot. It is a place where there is a history of frequent confusion. Runway incursions or wrong taxiway events are frequent in hotspots. For example, people being told to take taxiway Golf might take Alpha 5, because taxiway Golf is a pretty hard turn. You're taking Alpha 5 and then it's a hard left on Golf.
Right.
But you could see how someone would be confused to see the Golf sign and just keep going straight into the jet center, when really they want to take Golf this way. Another thing I've seen people do is land, told to make a left on Delta, but they make their left turn on the runway.
Oh, man.
Don't do that. That is a runway incursion. Follow a yellow line off the runway.
Okay.
If you don't see a yellow leadoff line, it's probably not a taxiway that you're seeing, especially if it has white lines.
Oh, no.
I did have one student who, in one very specific situation, made that mistake because I had taught him only to follow the yellow lines. It had just poured rain. The rain was gone, it was good, but the sun was setting. So the light was reflecting off the water and you could not see a single mark on the ground. So that's where I failed as an instructor, because I didn't give alternative ways that would work in all situations. So we learned from that, and use your signs too. So you see the yellow delta sign, you're going to turn at the next immediate turn just after that sign. That's a lot of the rules there. Don't cross a solid line unless you are absolutely sure that you have permission to do it, or ILS approaches aren't in use in the case of the ILS critical area. But when it comes to getting off the runway, get off as quickly as possible, and then stop the airplane and figure out where you're going and get your clearance to go to the ramp. Okay, so let's go over some of these. So we have this sign here that says 4 and 2-2. So if we have a runway in front of us, and then the taxiway as well, we're coming off the ramp. And I'll use orange just because it's very hard to see yellow on a white background. It's a very light color. Which way are you going to turn if you're told to taxi to runway 9er?
We'll be making a right turn on whatever taxiway that is.
They always put the runway number on the side of the sign where you need to go. So if it's a right turn to go to 9, you'll make a right turn, and they'll put the 9 on the right side. And if the 27 is on the left side, you know it's a left turn to go to 27. So it's not always written in numerical order. It's written in the way that you'd want to turn to go there.
Okay.
All right, what if we saw it looked like this? There we go. That's a yellow sign. What does that mean?
27 left and right. That is something that I have not ever had to. I've heard it before, but I'm not familiar with what that means.
That's fine. That's exactly what that dot means. And
both
of those runways are that direction. It'd be a left turn to go to 27 left or 27 right.
Okay.
So there's 2 runways in that direction.
What is that? Just if you can do a...
Oh yeah, let's talk about parallel runways. That's a lot of fun.
Okay, so it is parallel. What is?
They're not always exactly the same size. Sometimes they vary in size. Could you write number 9 on there? And would that be left or right?
This would be right.
That'd be 9 right. Very good. So you can do an R. What about this one?
This would be 9 left.
Very good. I'll take that. Now this would be 27 right or left.
This one?
Yeah.
This would be 27 left and 27 right. Oh.
Correct. So it's whichever way you are looking at it from. So 27 left and 9 right are the same piece of pavement, which is fun. Okay. What if they had a third runway down the middle? What would that one be numbered?
It would, I'm going to assume just the runway numbers.
It'd be 9C for center.
I should have guessed that.
It's all right. And then we have 27 center. So that one's easier than the left and right. Now, if they had a fourth runway, what they would do in this case for runway numbering, this is starting to get really confusing.
Right.
So instead of doing a center, that would be 9 left. That one.
Oh my goodness.
But then what they would do is even though they're the same, they'd make this be runway 10 or 8.
Okay.
And then this one would be the reverse of that. Let's make a runway 8. Why not?
That is interesting.
So even though the runway number should align, and that'd be 8 right, and that'd be 8 left.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it would be?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that's the right one that's 8.
Okay.
That's the left one that's 8. So even though runway number is supposed to align with the direction, they will purposely number it 1 plus or minus just to eliminate the confusion.
Okay.
So that you can know exactly which runway you're landing on, and it'll match up. Do you know what statistically is the highest risk of a runway incursion configuration?
Runways that cross each other?
That, for me, I would think so as well. But statistically, it is offset parallels, where this runway threshold is a different spot than this one. So this would still be 9 left.
Yeah.
But because the thresholds are offset for whatever reason, this statistically causes a lot of wrong surface events. Because maybe you don't even see this runway. You think it looks like a taxiway because it's farther ahead.
I gotcha.
So you line up with this one and thinking the taxiway next to it is a runway.
Correct. Especially if you're coming from this side of the...
Yes. Which brings me to another runway incursion, or not really a runway incursion, but very high risk situation where you mistake a taxiway for a runway. What if at night the lights were turned off on this runway? You were told to land 9 left. You only see one runway. Your mind will fill in the blanks of, even though it's blue taxiway lights over here, you'll see this. Or sorry, if you were told to land 9 right.
Right.
You'll see that taxiway as 9 right.
Exactly.
Even though the lights were off on this one.
Wow.
So just be prepared for that. Blue lights are taxiways. White lights are runways. It is white lights for the runway. And it is blue, green lights. But look at this. When you get towards the end of the runway, they turn yellow or amber. And at the very end of the runway, they turn red.
Does that, what does that signify? The end of the runway?
2,000 feet remaining. When it goes from white to amber.
Okay.
So for a really short runway, most of the lights might be amber. Or all of them. But just know that when the color changes, like way down here, that's where you're running out of runway. And it'll be the opposite the other way. These lights, if you actually looked at them, they sit on a pole. They have a little cover on them with almost like a little hood to kind of keep the rain and things out. And they'll have a bulb that is white on one side if you're landing this way, where you have lots of room, and amber on the other.
I gotcha. Okay.
So it's the same light, but it's a different color depending on which direction you look at it.
Correct.
But because all these lights are like this, you can't see them from the side.
I gotcha.
So when you're flying your downwind leg, it's actually really hard to see an airport because you can't see the runway lights. They're directional lights. They only shine this way and this way. But if you're looking at the runway from this way, you can't see it.
Wow, that's not something that I don't know that I've encountered that yet.
When we fly at night, we will. So it's actually easier to use the taxiways that parallel the runway to align yourself with the runway.
Okay.
The blue lights are omnidirectional. You can see them in any direction. And we'll get to more of that when we cover night flying. But just something to be aware of there, and what the colors of the lights mean at night. Another thing to be aware of, see these lights on the sides?
Yes.
Not too many airports that I've flown at have them. Runway status lights is what they're called. If they're white like this, that's fine. They clear you to land, you're good. But if those lights suddenly turn red, go around immediately. This system has detected that there is another airplane either lined up with the runway or on the runway that shouldn't be there. And even if air traffic control tells you to continue your landing, unless they specifically say those lights are inoperative or they're getting false readings, go around anyways.
Wow.
Now, that said, if they were red and then they turned to white, that lights being white is not clearance to land.
Right.
They are never a replacement for a clearance, but they can cancel a clearance.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
They're just there as an extra layer of protection.
Right.
If they turn red, all bets are off. Your clearance is canceled until tower tells you otherwise.
Okay. Whether
that's takeoff or landing. There we go. So that's runway status lights. We don't see them too often, but just be aware that if you have a bunch of lights that suddenly turn red on you, you might want to reconsider some choices. And that one, it's the same in driving. Don't go there. If it says do not, the white circle with the white line on the red background, you can't enter there.
Where would you typically see those? What's an example? A good example for that?
I don't know if they have them there, but a place where you would see them at Donaldson. See this little road right here? This is for vehicles. You might see one of those no entry signs on this road here.
Okay.
So that an airplane doesn't try to taxi on this tiny little vehicle access road. That would be the place you might see them. Or, whoa, did not want to do that. Or say this fence weren't here, and this taxiway continued onto a roadway. There would be a no entry sign, so airplanes know not to go out here. That would be bad.
Okay.
That would cause some confusion, to say the least. They don't want the vehicles and airplanes mixing too much. Yes, people can drive on the ramp, get their car out. There's like vehicle access gates, but the airplanes have right of way in that case. But we don't want the people who have driven out onto the ramp. No, they had to get a code. They've probably been briefed on the airport procedures for driving on the ramp, but you don't want the airplanes getting into the places meant for cars only. Cars are a little bit more maneuverable than an airplane in most cases.
I agree.
You would see this sign maybe right here.
Yep.
And it would be a yellow background there, yellow background there. Again, I'm using orange because yellow doesn't show up well. Here's a G for golf in yellow letters on the black background. And then we have Alpha going that way and Lima going that way. So if you see this sign, it means, remember, a black background, yellow letters, is a "you are here" sign.
Yep.
You are on golf right now if you see this sign. What does that sign mean?
Telling you that this would be taxiway Lima.
Good. And when you turn on to Lima, what kind of sign do you think you'd see?
You would see a yellow L with a black background.
Because now you're on Lima. Excellent.
Correct.
Okay. Where's taxiway Alpha?
Taxiway Alpha is going that direction.
This one. Good. How about this taxiway up here?
That's still a golf.
Still golf. There's one other sign that I consider a "you are here" sign, but it's a little bit different. This one right here. It's a runway distance remaining sign. So if you see a black sign with white lettering, and it's just a number, that means 4,000 feet remain on this runway. Well, there's a cool symbol. You don't see that one too often.
What's that?
We also see it here on the runway. It's got these yellow circles, is the same thing.
What's that?
That is a resting gear.
Oh, okay.
For airplanes with tail hooks, because they have military aircraft doing things here at Donaldson. If you know that it's going on in the area, and you hear Tower say that the resting gear has been retracted, or they're doing tests of it, make sure it's retracted when you're landing in your airplane.
Right.
That does not have a tail hook.
Resting hook.
Because that arresting wire will forcibly remove your wheels, which you might not want.
No.
That would not be a fun day.
It'd pretty much get clotheslined.
It would clothesline your wheels right off. Just a few miscellaneous things to go over. Taxi speed. You don't have a GPS readout on your plane, but a lot of them do. The FAA recommends a brisk walk. Do not taxi faster than that, but that's subjective and hard to tell when you're sitting up in a plane. My number is 13 knots.
Okay.
Your ground speed reading should not say more than 13 knots.
Got it.
If it does, you're taxiing way too quick. And I don't think I could briskly walk at 13 knots. I don't know if I could sprint at 13 knots. That is the fastest speed I would consider reasonable.
Okay.
Anything past that, there's no reason. What are you doing? What are some things that might be acceptable to be doing while taxiing? Can we be going through checklists and setting up our GPS and all that fun stuff?
I would say no. I would say you'd need to get as much of those tasks done before the aircraft is moving. But there are things that you can confirm if you're following a flow to make sure that you have those things done. I would say
that's an excellent answer. I really like that. I could see doing a flow, but if it's something where you have to look down and really put your head down, besides a quick glance at, yes, that switch is on, or yes,
right.
or I can feel mixture is full rich, I would not be doing it.
Okay.
You want to be focusing outside. So very good. There is a rule known as sterile cockpit, and that means keep conversation, but I would had one wise instructor say, even add your thoughts to that. Keep your words and thoughts on the task at hand.
Oh, wow.
Don't be thinking or talking about completely unrelated things while you're taxiing. Bring the airplane to a stop if you need to do anything other than taxiing or running through a flow, doing your takeoff briefing. That's a really good one to do while taxiing, is your briefing before your takeoff, because you're looking outside, but your mind is still on the flight. Those would be acceptable. Please don't be doing your checklists. Bring the plane to a stop if you really need to do a checklist. One exception being a multi-crew environment. One pilot could be taxiing while the other could be writing things down, programming things.
Right.
That's where the efficiency of two pilots is really awesome.
Okay.
And you can now do that safely. But in a single pilot environment, I do not recommend doing anything during taxiing other than taxiing, looking outside, and maybe running through a flow that's memorized, or doing a briefing where you're still looking outside. I would highly recommend planning your route before you taxi. And the cool thing with Preflight is you can draw on your diagram. So I would mark where we're starting from. So let's say we're starting at AvServe, which is up here. Put an X. I am here. Donaldson Tower, Cherokee 12345, requesting taxi for a south departure. Donaldson Tower might read back. Cherokee 12345, taxi via Alpha 4, runway 23. So let's draw that out before we start rolling. Alpha's right here. So I need to go out. It looks like a left turn to get up to runway 23. And there's Alpha 4. And I need to stop before the runway. They didn't say to stop or hold short of 23, but we know that we need to do that.
Correct.
It's a taxi to or taxi. They did not say take off.
Correct. So
what if you are taxiing and you realize, I have no idea where I am right now? You're looking at the taxiways out in front of you, the signs, the markings in what's on the ground, and it just is not matching up with where you think you should be.
I guess the first thing I could think of is ask, if you have the ability to ask the ground, I would ask them where exactly you are located.
Absolutely. Tell the tower that you were lost.
Okay.
They need to know that you're lost. If there is confusion, you need to figure that out quickly and maybe check the color of the markings that you're on. If you see white, stop. Normally my advice would be, if you're lost, stop. But if you see white markings, get off. Well, don't go, but get back to yellow markings.
Okay.
And then figure out where you are. But don't just stop on a runway being confused. That's not a good place to be stopped. There are other aircraft coming in. Very likely. This becomes a big issue in low visibility at night. It's not super hard on a clear day, but it can happen, especially at an unfamiliar airport. You might not know where you are. So you do have another option, and that's progressive taxi. That's where tower will only give you one instruction at a time. So you can request progressive taxi for your southbound departure, and Donaldson Tower will say, Cherokee 12345, make a left turn on Alpha. And then you taxi for a while, and it'd say, okay, Cherokee 12345, make a right turn on Alpha 4. Not a big deal here at Donaldson, but let's say we get to, how about that? Oh, I've already marked this one up quite extensively. Let's clear all those out. I like to draw out my NOTAMs too. If I know taxiways are closed, I'll scratch them out.
Oh, that's good.
That way I don't try to think. It declutters for me. It's something I don't have to worry about. But anyways, if we were landing to right and we wanted to get to the FBO here, whichever FBO that is. So we know we're coming into land and we want to get there. This is where some progressive taxi might be nice, because the only way to get there is to take Hotel, Lima, and then Tango 6 across, and then you might want some progressive taxi there, especially when there's parallel taxiways like this Lima and Juliet.
Oh, absolutely.
That could start to get really confusing really fast. And if you get high enough, they run out of letters, so they have to start putting letters together. But you might have, like, Alpha Lima would be a taxiway. They'd have 2 letters.
Which airport is this?
This is Nashville.
Oh, wow.
It's a big one. Really bad would be if you landed over here and had to get over here. I guess not terrible, but you can see how it would be very easy to get confused very quickly. Now, that's a Class Charlie. Some people would say, I don't want to land at a Class Charlie. I would say to them, go land at a Class Charlie. It's good practice. Brief your hotspots. If you see a hotspot like this, be aware of how confusion might happen so that it doesn't happen to you. Make sure you're keeping an eye outside on other airplanes, ground vehicles, pedestrians. Those can be unpredictable because you have no control over what the other people are doing. So keep an eye on them. There is a thing called land and hold short operations. There are hold short lines on the runways. So they have a crossing runway.
Oh, so if someone, okay, this is when you were talking about when accidents could happen. This is exactly what I was referring to.
So the way this clearance would be is you would hear in the ATIS, land and hold short operations in effect.
Okay.
And then let's say you're landing runway 1. They would say cleared to land runway 1, hold short 9er. Hold short 9er27. That means you're not allowed to use any of this runway up here. You only get this section up to the hold short line. As a student pilot, it is illegal for you to accept that clearance. You must say unable. Once you are a private pilot, you may. In most cases, I would say don't accept it because it puts an unnecessary pressure on you. Or I've heard the misconception that you're not allowed to go around if you're given a land and hold short operation. You can, but only if you absolutely have to. It puts more pressure on the landing, and that external pressure could make you do things that you might not otherwise do, like continuing an unstable or unsafe landing. Also, you need to know for sure that your airplane has the performance and you have the capability to land in that distance.
In that distance. Okay, makes sense.
It's hard to find. I think the easiest way to do it is to ask the tower, how much distance do I have available there? Know how much distance you need to land on that day. I know that for your Cherokee, it's roughly 2,000 feet would be an extremely conservative estimate. We could do it in 2,000 feet.
Right.
Double that. If you don't have 4,000 feet, don't accept it.
Right.
But if you do have 4,000 feet and the winds are favorable and you are feeling good that day, like you really can do it.
Right.
I think there is a time and a place for that might be acceptable to do.
Okay.
But just be aware that a lot of like charter operations and even airlines forbid their pilots from doing it. And the fact that it's illegal for a student pilot to do, it's a high risk thing. So make that decision very carefully if you're going to land and hold short. Give yourself a really conservative estimate for how much landing distance you need. Double that and let that be your cutoff if you even want to consider it. If you want to have a personal policy that I will never accept a land and hold short operation or clearance, that's fine too. You tell the tower unable. Because the problem is they're having another airplane landing this way at the same time.
Correct.
If you go over, it's not going to be good.
No.
That's the threshold. So that's the beginning of the runway. You can touch down at the very beginning of the threshold, but not short of it. But I recommend touching down a little bit farther. You don't want to hit those lights there. That's expensive. What is this thing?
Centerline?
Centerline stripe. So if I say, and once you get into your check ride, you'll do accuracy landings. You might be told, I want you to land on the third centerline stripe. That means you touch down here.
Okay.
What if they say land on the 500-foot markers?
Would be these.
It'd be these guys. Good. What about the 1,000-foot markers?
The solid stripes.
Those ones. Very good. So 500 feet, 1,000 feet, another 500 feet, another 500 feet, another 500, another 500. Then they don't have too many. And then there's some more. That's those runway markings. What is that? Because here's the threshold, but there's runway back here. This is called a displaced threshold. The threshold has been moved up. They often do that because of obstacles in the way, so you don't try to fly too low at approach and hit those obstacles. But they could also do it for structural reasons. This is an embankment that's been built up. This might not be able to handle the weight of an airplane landing.
Wow.
Hard. For your little airplane, it's probably not a big deal, but it is illegal. You have to touch down past the displaced threshold.
It's good to know.
Now, could I use this distance for takeoff?
That I'd say I'm not sure.
There's a taxiway that leads onto it. So yes, you can.
You can?
You can use this distance for takeoff. You can taxi all the way down here and use this full part for takeoff. You're good. Just don't taxi. Just don't land in this area. You have to land in this area. What about this surface where it's got these yellow markings? Can I use that for takeoff or landing?
No.
No. What'll happen?
That is, isn't that the, for emergencies when an aircraft can't brake in time? That's like a brittle?
They call it an Engineered Material Arrestor System.
Okay.
EMAS. EMAS.
Got it.
It is a special concrete designed to collapse under weight. So yes, you go into it, you will sink, and you will stop in a hurry.
Like a runaway ramp.
It will do a lot of damage to your plane, but you won't be going down into this road and going off the cliff. Assuming you're not going 100 knots. I don't know if it could help you then, but...
I gotcha.
But if your brakes failed, it would protect you. So marshaling, you get your hand signals. A lot of people see that and they don't know what to do. What does this mean?
Approach.
This means come forward, come straight at me. You might also see them holding out their arms like this or like this. That means line up the front of the airplane at me. So if this is your plane, or I'll give you this.
Okay.
You can hold it in view of the camera. If I'm doing this, you want to line up the plane so that it's pointed at me.
Right.
So that means get the front of the plane pointed at me this way.
Yeah.
Good.
Like that. You
might also see them doing this. That means go to a person over there.
Right.
Turn that way. Very good. Okay. What about this?
That's also
turn this way or turn that way.
Right.
Well, this is actually handing you off to someone else. If you see someone doing this, you're going to see another person doing this.
Okay.
This person's telling you go to this person. What if they do this?
That's stop.
No, it's not. It means get ready to stop.
Okay, gotcha.
I used to do this for a living, and I can't tell you how many times I'd be doing this, and then I'd start doing it and slam on the brakes. No, I need you to come up a little bit more. Don't stop until they meet and give you the X, or with their hands.
Okay.
That's stop. If they do this, that's kill your engine. Shut it down right now.
Wow.
So be aware of that. This is start your engine. So give them a signal if they're marshaling you out.
Okay.
Another big thing to be aware of, please don't have your really bright landing light turned on and blind your marshal. They're not useful to you if they're blind. So when you're ready to move, instead of turning on your taxi light, just flash it on off.
Got it.
Like, here we go. A quick flash of the taxi light that lets them know that you're ready to move, and then they'll start marshaling you.
Okay.
Don't turn on your bright lights until they're not in the way of them.
Makes sense.
You can do permanent damage to them and to yourself if they're blind and don't see that car barreling down the way and stop you in time. So that's marshaling. Don't panic if you see them. Treat them with respect. So I guess the last thing we'll talk about is untowered airports. How does a runway incursion happen there? I don't know what it is about Pickens County Airport, but it attracts craziness. There's no control tower. There's still a hold short line here, but it's kind of just a... Oh, no, there's not. That was just a line in the pavement. Because the taxiway is just as uncontrolled as the ramp is.
Correct.
Should you make a call that you were taxiing?
Yes.
I would. Let them know. Pickens traffic, Cherokee 12345, taxiing from the ramp, runway 5. Notice that I don't use the word to runway 5, because that can sound like a number. I like to just remove those words that could be confused with numbers.
Correct.
It sounds kind of weird, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. But you don't have to do that. That's just a stylistic choice of mine. There are still hold short lines, though. Now, you don't get cleared to take off. You won't hear cleared for takeoff runway 5. We take off when there's no one in the way. We look both ways and we go. Legally, that's fine, but you should also make a radio call. Pickens traffic, Cherokee 12345, departing runway 5. Or taking off runway 5. Just communicate what you're doing at an untowered airport. Don't consider it an uncontrolled airport. It is a pilot-controlled airport.
Correct.
That's a cool distinction to think about. That I think it was M0A on YouTube who put that out there, and it is a good way to think about it. You are working with the other pilots. The standard is to make position reports saying, I'm here, I'm doing this. But also, if there's someone there, talk to them. If you see someone on the downwind leg, and you heard them say something like making a short approach, or maybe you just see them turning really short, ask them, hey, is there enough time for me to, or do you want me to wait for you?
Correct.
Establish a conversation with them. You don't want to take up a ton of time, but when you single someone out and direct your focus at them, they're more likely to respond and more likely to work with you. And a collision is much less likely in that case.
It's good to know.
That was a suggestion from Dan Grider, who is a controversial figure, but he does have some pretty good ideas. I do really like that one. Talk to people. Don't just report your position. Just like a towered airport, one person on the runway at a time.
Okay.
One person using the runway at a time. You should not take off until that person is clear of the runway. Now, at a towered airport, I think they're allowed to let you cross a runway and another airplane cross a runway as long as there's 3,000 feet apart, or cross a runway after someone's land as long as there's 3,000 feet apart. So don't be overly concerned if a tower asks you to do that, but on your own, one person on the runway at a time. Very easy rule to remember. Wait till they are fully clear of that runway before you do anything. And if they're just rolling and taking their sweet time to turn off that runway, go around. Don't try to continue landing behind them. Don't do S-turns and get super slow and then stall, waiting for them to clear the runway.
Correct.
Go around. And maybe go around right side or left side. If you ever heard that term, go around right or left side, it means sidestep. Don't stay directly over the middle of the runway. Get off to one side a little bit.
That is good to know.
It is very good to know. But what if they're doing a touch and go and they took forever? And they're taking off at the same time. Now that's where you really want that sidestep, because you could have two airplanes in the same place at the same time.
Very true.
If you're going around because they took too much time on the runway and then they do a touch and go and take off again. Don't do that. If someone's on your tail, Do a quick touch and go. Don't do a stop and go or get off the runway. Okay, if someone's landing and taking forever to turn off, can you take off on top of them?
No.
No, that's a runway incursion. That is two people on the runway at the same time. If you had to abort your takeoff for some reason, you could plow right into them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that was helpful and that you all have a very nice day.